Innistrad Remastered brings us back to ye olde plane of horrors and spooks, and with it comes some very powerful reprints. Edgar Markov, the granddaddy of all vampires, perhaps the most powerful vampire commander in the game, is getting a reprint. And since we've never actually built an Edgar Markov deck for this channel, perhaps now would be the best time to do so. Edgar Markov is a 6 mana vampire knight, costing 3 generic and then 1 each of red, white, and black mana. He has first strike and haste, and whenever Edgar attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter onto each vampire we control. Lastly, he has Eminence, a triggered ability where whenever we cast another vampire spell, if Edgar Markov is in the command zone or on the battlefield, we create a 1/1 black vampire creature token. This goes without saying, Edgar Markov is absurdly powerful. Eminence is touted as one of the most broken keyword abilities in Commander, giving us access to a value engine whether he's in the command zone or on the battlefield. We could reasonably play this deck successfully without ever needing to cast him once. For each vampire we cast, he gives an additional 1/1 vampire token, which we can use as an attacker, a blocker, sack fodder, what have you. Should he hit the battlefield, he has first strike and haste, meaning that he'll be swinging for the fences right out of the gate. He will also give a +1/+1 counter to each vampire we control, which does include himself. There is a lot that we can do with Edgar Markov. Obviously, we're going to be building a vampire deck, and we want to get as many vampires cast as possible to get the value from their own inherent abilities and to get the extra vampire tokens off of Edgar. Even something as simple as a turn 1 vampire can net us extra creatures, and so this deck will want to go in hard and fast to outpace the hate that we're going to get at the table. Our list today goes as low to the ground as possible without sacrificing too many of the higher mana value vampires. The lower our mana curve, the more spells we can play per turn, and the more value we will get in the long game. Vampires do have the greatest synergies among kindred decks, and so you really do have your pick of the litter as to what cards to include. So at the end of the day, if there are some cards in our list that really aren't your cup of tea, you are more than welcome to swap them out for some of your own personal preferences. With that in mind, let's begin. Our first section will cover our best vampires. While all 26 creatures in the deck are vampires, there are some that provide better value than others. Bloodline Keeper is a classic vampire staple. Being able to tap to create a 2/2 vampire creature token is powerful, but once we hit 5 or more vampires, we can pay 1 black to transform him into the Lord of Lineage. The Lord of Lineage can tap to create those same 2/2 flying vampires just as his front face could, but this side carries with it a potent anthem effect, giving our other vampire creatures +2/+2. The tokens that Edgar Markov creates become 3/3s. The Lord's tokens become 4/4s, not to mention what our non-token vampires become. Charismatic Conqueror acts as a taxation ability. Any artifacts or creatures that would enter untapped under an opponent's control can be tapped, or we create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink, giving us even more vampires. Clavelenyo, First of the Blessed, is a bit of a unique vampire, letting us turn one of our attacking vampires into a demon, should it not already be one, and then when that creature dies, we draw a card and create a tapped 4/4 white and black vampire demon token with flying. This is large protection against board wipes and removal, and it ensures that we can maintain having large creatures in play even if our vampires are slain. Cordial Vampire is a generally fun means to get +1/+1 counters put out around our board. See, we do a sufficient amount of sacrifice in this deck, and so anytime that a creature dies, we buff our entire board state. Alenda's Hierophant brings in some life gain relevance. Vampires do a decent amount of life gain, and being able to turn that into +1/+1 counters and then later into future creature token creation makes this a very valuable creature. Master of the Dark Rites is perhaps my favorite turn 1 play, as you'll get a vampire creature token just off of this card being cast. We can then use those tokens that Edgar creates to create 3 black mana, which is technically only usable to cast vampire spells, but this is a moot point as, like we said before, our entire creature base is vampires. Teehee. Mavrin Fane, Dusk Apostle, creates life-linking vampires as our other non-token vampires attack, giving us, again, extra bodies in play. Sanctum Seeker could easily transition into becoming a win condition as we swing out with our entire board of vampires. Each one will trigger the Seeker, causing each opponent to lose 1 life, and then we gain 1 life. Amalia Benavides Aguirre has a ward cost of 3 life, meaning that if an opponent can't or doesn't pay 3 life as an additional cost to target her, the spell or ability is countered. That being said, whenever we gain life, we explore. This allows us to reveal the top card of our library. If it's a land, it goes to our hand. If it isn't a land, we can either return it to the top of our library or pitch it to the graveyard, and then Amalia gets a +1/+1 counter. Once she hits exactly 20 power, she destroys all other creatures, making her a very volatile board wipe. Captivating Vampire is another oldie but a goodie, giving us a vampire-specific anthem, and you can also tap 5 untapped vampires we control to steal an opponent's creature and make it into a vampire. Twilight Prophet is card draw on a stick. This card gives us extra card draw at the beginning of our upkeep, but then gets extra value once we've gained the City's Blessing for controlling 10 or more permanents. At that point, when we reveal that top card of our library at our upkeep, each opponent loses X life and we gain X life, where the X is the revealed card's mana value. Voldaren Bloodcaster creates a blood token whenever it or another non-token creature we control dies. Blood tokens are artifact tokens that for 1 mana, we can tap and sacrifice the blood token and discard a card from our hand to draw a card. Once we've hit 5 or more blood tokens, the Bloodcaster transforms into the Bloodbat Summoner. At the beginning of combat on our turn, up to 1 blood token we control becomes a 2/2 black bat creature token with flying and haste. This ability does not end at the end step of the turn, and so any blood tokens we want can begin turning into bats that can still be sacrificed for the card draw. Welcoming Vampire gives us 1 card draw trigger per turn whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters. All of the tokens that Edgar creates are 1/1s, so we have a very good value engine here. Glasscast Heart offers us some additional blood token creation, which can be great to help us draw cards with, but we can then trade 13 of our blood tokens to have each opponent lose 13 life and we gain 13 life. We can also pay a black and 1 life, tap the Glasscast Heart to create a 1/1 vampire with lifelink. Idol of Oblivion works very well with the sheer number of other tokens we create, letting us draw a card off of it. If we have the mana and no longer need the idol, we could trade it in for a 10/10 Eldrazi. The Eldrazi itself isn't super relevant, but it is a big body when we need it. Skull Clamp is a staple in token decks, letting us clamp our 1/1 tokens by equipping them with the Skull Clamp, which will kill the creature and allow us to draw 2 cards. Voldaren Estate lets us create any color mana to cast our vampires, and we can create a blood token. This ability will get 1 mana cheaper for each vampire we control, meaning that we might only need to tap the estate to create the blood token and pay no additional mana. Now let's discuss how this deck wins. We do include Bloodthirsty Conqueror and Vito Thorn of the Duskrose, who form a variation of the exquisite Blood Sanguine Bond combo, which upon an opponent losing 1 life or us gaining 1 life, we can drain the table infinitely. I've largely lost interest in most of these infinite combos, though this one being entirely vampire themed made me feel like I should at least mention it. These 2 cards are also much more susceptible to removal, making it slightly easier to deal with. If you're not a fan of infinite combos, you absolutely can exclude these cards. Malakir Bloodwitch is one of my favorite vampire win conditions. As it enters, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires we control, and then we gain the life lost this way. This is one of the stronger abilities vampires got from an era when Magic Design didn't take into account multiplayer games with larger board states, and so we have this powerful card. Cover of Darkness gives our vampires fear, meaning the only artifact creatures and black creatures can block our creatures. This can be lethal in some contexts, as some decks don't have access to black creatures, and other decks don't run any artifact creatures, meaning our board state will be unblockable. Impact Tremors is here for the large number of tokens that we create. Any creature entering pings each opponent for 1 damage, letting us get off quite a bit of damage for our large-scale token generators. Speaking of large-scale token generators, Sorin Grim Nemesis has a +1 ability to draw us a card and then have each opponent lose life equal to that card's mana value. His -9 creates us 1/1 Vampire Knights equal to the highest life total among other players, which realistically should be us. Combined with Impact Tremors, this will kill the table, if it is us of course with the highest life total. So to play Edgar Markov optimally is to cast your vampire spells early, get the value from each of their inherent abilities, and getting in damage where you can. You want to play fast and aggressively so you can outrace the other players at the table. As your deck builds momentum, you'll reach a critical mass of creatures and damage output, and you'll have reached a point where you've effectively secured the win. If you want to change it up a little bit, we do have access to such cards as War Leader's Call and Perforos, God of the Forge, 2 cards that will burn each opponent whenever a creature enters under our control, giving you even more damage. But for now, that will bring us to the end of our look at Edgar Markov. Are there any spicy tech or techniques that you recommend to folks curious to try this deck? Let's talk about it in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, likes and shares are the best ways to help us out here. If you're new, subscribe so you never miss a video, and as always, I'll catch you all in the next video.